During the intervention Melissa staged in my own living room, she shoved me hard enough that I fell into the bookshelf my late wife had loved. As I steadied myself against the oak, hand going to the bruise already forming on my shoulder, she smiled at the fake doctor she'd hired and said, "See? He's clearly unstable. We need that power of attorney signed today." What she didn't know was that the conversation was being recorded. And by tomorrow morning she'd discover I'd already made a phone call that would unravel everything she'd planned. Before we continue, please subscribe to Sleek Vengeance, and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The realtor's card sat on my kitchen counter like an accusation. I'd found it there that Tuesday afternoon when I came back from my walk, placed deliberately next to my coffee maker where I couldn't miss it. Keller Williams, residential specialist. Free home valuation. I turned it over. On the back in Melissa's handwriting, "Dad, just thinking about your options. House is too much for you now. Let's talk. Love, M. Love." The word felt calculated, strategic, the same way her smile felt calculated when she'd moved into my guest bedroom 6 months ago with my stepson Daniel, promising it was temporary, just until they found the right place in Austin's impossible market. I set the card down and looked around the kitchen my wife Sarah and I had renovated 15 years ago. White subway tile we'd installed ourselves over 3 weekends, arguing good-naturedly about grout color. The kitchen island where she'd rolled out pie dough every Thanksgiving, the window over the sink that caught morning light the way she'd wanted when we designed the addition. Sarah had been gone 3 years. The house hadn't become too much. It had become everything. Footsteps on the stairs announced Melissa before she appeared, dressed in what I'd learned to recognize as her real estate agent uniform. Blazer, heels, tablet tucked under her arm like a weapon. She was 35, sharp-featured, with the kind of confidence that mistook volume for authority. "Oh, good. You found my note," she said, not quite looking at me. She opened the refrigerator, pulled out the almond milk she'd bought without asking if I wanted it taking up space, poured herself a glass. "I have a colleague who specializes in senior transitions. She's amazing, very compassionate." Senior transitions. The phrase hung in the air between us, clinical and final. "I'm 62, I said quietly. "Not deceased." "Dad." She set the glass down with enough force that milk sloshed onto the counter she didn't wipe up. "You know what I mean. This house is 4 bedrooms. You're 1 person. Do you know what a property this size is worth in Terrytown, with the school district and walkability scores?" I did know. I'd owned it for 30 years. Raised Daniel here after I married his mother when he was 8. Walked him to Clayton Elementary every morning until he was old enough to bike alone. This was the house where he'd learned to ride that bike, where I'd run beside him on this same street holding the seat until he found his balance and I let go. "I'm not selling," I said. Melissa's smile tightened. "We're not asking you to decide today. Just think about it. Daniel and I could help you find a nice condo. Something manageable, low maintenance." She left for a showing before I could respond, heels clicking across the hardwood. Sarah and I had refinished together, the door closing with a decisive thump that felt like punctuation. That evening, Daniel came home from his job at the tech startup downtown, looking tired in the way he'd looked tired for months now. Rumpled button down, hair that needed cutting, shadows under his eyes that spoke of stress he wasn't sharing. He'd been quieter since they moved in, his easy laugh replaced by something more cautious, measured. "Hey, Dad." He dropped his messenger bag by the door, another habit Melissa had criticized. "How was your day?" "Your wife left a realtor's card on my counter." He closed his eyes briefly, expression shifting through guilt and resignation. "She mentioned wanting to talk to you about that." "She's not talking, she's deciding." I kept my voice level, the way I'd learned in my 30 years as a high school history teacher. "Stay calm, state facts, let the other person come to their own conclusions. This is my home, Daniel. I'm not interested in condos or transitions or whatever she's planning." "I know." He sat heavily on the couch, the same couch where I'd taught him to tie his shoes, where Sarah had read him bedtime stories when he couldn't sleep. "I know, Dad. I'll talk to her." But I'd heard that promise before, delivered with the same exhausted resignation. Talk to her about not rearranging my furniture. Talk to her about asking before inviting her book club to meet here. Talk to her about the way she spoke to me like I was a child who'd forgotten his own address. The conversations never seemed to change anything. 3 weeks later, I came back from my Thursday morning coffee with my friend Robert to find two women I'd never met standing in my living room with measuring tapes. Melissa stood between them, gesturing animatedly, her voice bright with the enthusiasm she reserved for clients and strangers, never for me. "The bones are incredible," she was saying. "Original hardwood, crown molding. With some staging and minor updates, this could list for $850, maybe $900,000. I stood in my own doorway, grocery bag still in my hands, watching a stranger measure my living room window. "Excuse me," I said. All three women turned. "Can someone explain what's happening?" Melissa's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Dad, this is Rebecca and Shannon. They're helping me get a sense of the market potential. I told you we needed to explore options. You told me you wanted to talk. I don't recall agreeing to a home invasion." Rebecca, the older of the two strangers, had the grace to look uncomfortable. She lowered her measuring tape, glanced at Melissa with something that might have been doubt. "We can come back another time," Rebecca said carefully. "You won't need to come back at all." I set the groceries on the entry table. "Because this house isn't for sale." After they left, Melissa followed me into the kitchen where I was unpacking milk and bread with hands that wanted to shake but wouldn't. Not in front of her. "You're being unreasonable," she said. Each word crisp, precise. "We're trying to help you. This house is falling apart. The roof needs work. The AC is ancient. The foundation probably has issues. Do you have any idea what those repairs cost on your teacher's pension? The roof is fine. The AC works. And my finances are none of your concern. They are when Daniel and I are going to inherit this money pit and have to deal with everything you're ignoring." The words landed like she'd meant them to, sharp and cutting. There it was, finally spoken out loud. Not concern about my well-being. Concern about future inheritance. About equity she was already counting as hers. I turned to face her fully. "You've been living here 6 months rent-free. I've never asked you for $1 toward utilities or groceries. I've accommodated your schedule, your friends, your needs. And now you're bringing strangers into my home to measure it for sale without my permission?" "We're family," she said, as if that explained everything, excused everything. "Family helps each other. Daniel and I need a permanent place. This house is perfect for us. Perfect for when we have kids. You don't need all this space. Where exactly do you imagine I'll go? There are wonderful communities for active seniors, tennis, book clubs, someone else handling maintenance. You'd probably be happier." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw it clearly for the first time. This had never been temporary. She'd moved in with a timeline, a strategy, a plan that ended with my departure and her name on the deed. "Get out of my kitchen," I said quietly. Something flickered across her face, surprise maybe, that I'd finally pushed back. But she recovered quickly, gathered her tablet and purse, walked out with her head high like she'd won something, instead of revealed her hand too soon. That night I lay awake in the bedroom I'd shared with Sarah, staring at shadows on the ceiling that shifted with passing headlights. Down the hall I could hear Melissa and Daniel's muffled argument, her voice sharp and insistent, his softer, placating. The house had never felt smaller. By morning, I'd made my decision. At 7 a.m. I called Patricia Martinez, the attorney who'd handled Sarah's estate 3 years ago. Professional, thorough, unimpressed by emotional manipulation. We had an appointment for that afternoon. What I didn't know yet was how far Melissa was willing to go. That would become clear exactly 1 week later, on a Tuesday afternoon that started normally and ended with police in my driveway. The doorbell rang at 2. I answered to find a woman in her 40s holding a clipboard and ID badge, flanked by 2 Austin police officers. Behind them, Melissa stood next to a man I'd never seen, someone who wore a cheap suit and carried himself with the practiced sympathy of someone used to difficult conversations. "Mr. James Mitchell?" the woman with the clipboard asked. "I'm Sandra Chen from Texas Adult Protective Services. We received a concerning report about your welfare. May we come in?" My mouth went dry. "A report from whom?" Melissa stepped forward. "Dad, we're just worried about you. Dr. Harrison here," she gestured to the man in the cheap suit, "has agreed to do an evaluation. Standard stuff. Memory test, cognitive function. It's for your own good. I don't know any Dr. Harrison. I looked at the man who was studying me with professional concern that felt rehearsed. "Did she hire you?" "Mr. Mitchell," Sandra Chen said gently. "The report indicated you've been confused, forgetting to eat, showing signs of dementia. Your family is concerned you may not be safe living alone. We just want to make sure you're okay." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Melissa had called APS, had claimed I was incompetent, had hired some doctor to rubber stamp an evaluation that would give her ammunition for guardianship, for power of attorney, for everything she needed to take control. "I'm fine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady while rage built hot in my chest. "I don't forget to eat. I'm not confused. This is a setup." "Dad, don't be paranoid," Melissa said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "See, this is exactly what we're talking about. The suspicion, the anger, classic symptoms." "May we come inside?" Sandra Chen asked. Not really a question when two police officers stood behind her. I stepped aside. They settled in my living room. Sandra with her forms, Dr. Harrison with his tablet, the officers standing near the door like sentries. Melissa sat on my couch, hands folded, expression perfectly calibrated to concerned daughter-in-law who'd tried everything and finally had to make the hard call. "Mr. Mitchell," Dr. Harrison began, "I'm going to ask you some simple questions. What day is it today?" "Tuesday, March 19th. My voice came out flat, mechanical. "You're not a real doctor, are you? She paid you to come here and declare me incompetent." "Dad, please." Melissa's voice broke just slightly. A masterful performance. "We're trying to help. Last week you left the stove on. You forgot Daniel's birthday. You told my friend Rebecca you'd never met her when she'd been here twice." Lies. All lies delivered with enough specificity that they sounded plausible. The stove had never been left on. I'd called Daniel on his birthday like I did every year. Rebecca had been a complete stranger, the first and only time she'd been in my house. "None of that is true," I said. Sandra Chen made notes on her clipboard, expression neutral. The officers shifted their weight. Dr. Harrison tapped his tablet screen. "What year is it?" he asked. 2025. "And you're a fraud." I turned to Sandra. "I want to see credentials. I want to know exactly what was reported and by whom. This is elder abuse, disguised as concern." "Elder abuse?" Melissa stood abruptly. "How dare you? After everything we've done? Living here, taking care of you, putting up with your moods and confusion? This is the thanks we get? You've lived here rent-free for 6 months while planning to steal my house." "Steal?" Her voice climbed toward outrage. "We're family. This house will be Daniel's eventually anyway. We're just trying to help you transition before you hurt yourself or someone else. Where's Daniel?" I looked around, realizing he wasn't there. "Did you make sure he'd be at work for this?" Something flickered in her expression. Guilt, maybe. Calculation. She'd absolutely made sure Daniel wouldn't be here to interfere, to question, to defend me. "Mr. Mitchell," Sandra said, "I understand you're upset, but these evaluations are standard procedure when we receive reports. If everything checks out, there's nothing to worry about. And if your hired doctor declares me incompetent based on lies his employer told him?" I gestured at Harrison. "What happens then?" "We'd explore appropriate care options," Sandra said carefully, "but let's not get ahead of ourselves." For the next 45 minutes, I answered their questions. Counted backward from 100 by sevens. Named the president, drew a clock showing 3:15. Recited my address, phone number, the names of my medications. I didn't take any. Each correct answer felt like a small victory and a larger insult that this was happening at all. Finally, Dr. Harrison set down his tablet. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm not seeing any concerning cognitive deficits. Mr. Mitchell is oriented to time and place. His memory is intact, and he demonstrates appropriate reasoning." Melissa's face flushed dark. "That's impossible. You weren't listening. He's paranoid, delusional. He accused me of trying to steal his house." "Are you trying to take control of this property?" I asked quietly. "Because that's not paranoia. That's observation of your actual behavior." "This is ridiculous." Melissa grabbed her purse. "I'm calling our attorney. Dad, you're going to regret this stubbornness. When you fall and can't get up, when you have a medical emergency and there's nobody here because you pushed away the only people who care about you, remember this moment. She stormed out. The officers followed. "Doctor?" Harrison gathered his things quickly, avoiding eye contact. Sandra Chen remained a moment longer. "Mr. Mitchell," she said quietly, "I'll close this case as unfounded. But I have to tell you, family situations like this often escalate. If you feel unsafe, there are resources." After they left, I stood alone in my living room, adrenaline still flooding my system, hands finally shaking now that no one could see. I walked to my office, opened the desk drawer where I'd hidden the small recording device Robert had lent me 2 days ago when I'd told him about the measuring tape incident. The device was still running, red light steady and patient. It had captured everything. Melissa's accusations, my responses, Doctor Harrison's evaluation, the lies delivered with enough conviction that someone less prepared might have been destroyed by them. I stopped the recording, connected the device to my computer, saved the file with the date and timestamp clear in the title. Then I called Patricia Martinez. "I need to see you immediately," I said when she answered. "I have evidence of attempted fraud and elder abuse, and I want to press charges." The first thing Patricia did when I arrived at her office 90 minutes later was listen to the entire recording without interruption. Her expression remained neutral until Melissa's voice on the recording said, "This house will be Daniel's eventually anyway. We're just trying to help you transition." She admitted it, Patricia said, stopping playback. On recording, in front of witnesses, that she's attempting to gain control of your property under false pretenses. What can we do? Patricia pulled out a legal pad, began writing in the neat script I'd learned to recognize as her building a case. First, we file for a protective order. She's demonstrated a pattern of escalating behavior, unauthorized appraisals, bringing strangers into your home, false APS report. That's harassment and attempted exploitation of an elder. Daniel won't understand. He'll think I'm attacking his wife. She attacked you first. Patricia's voice softened slightly. "James, I handled your wife's estate. I know how much that house means to you. If you don't act now, if you let this continue because you're afraid of upsetting your stepson, she will win. People like Melissa don't stop. They escalate." I nodded slowly, thinking about Daniel at 8 years old, holding my hand as we walked to school. Daniel at 18, hugging me before leaving for college. Daniel at 35, quiet and tired, saying I'll talk to her like he'd said it 100 times before without effect. "What else?" I asked. "We update your will. Create an addendum that specifically disinherits anyone who attempts to gain control of your property or finances through fraud, coercion, or false reports. If she succeeds in getting guardianship through false pretenses, or if Daniel remains married to her, the property goes elsewhere, charity, a trust for his future children that she can't touch. Wherever you want, but not to them. That will destroy my relationship with Daniel. Maybe. Or maybe it will wake him up to what he's married to." Patricia leaned forward. "James," she staged an intervention with a fake doctor and police. She called Adult Protective Services with fabricated concerns. "This isn't about a house anymore. This is about power and control. If Daniel can't see that, if he chooses to stay with someone capable of this level of manipulation, then you need to protect yourself." That night I sat at my kitchen table with divorce papers for Sarah, medical records, bank statements proving my competence and independence, the recording of Melissa's accusations and Dr. Harrison's evaluation clearing me. I organized everything into folders with the methodical care I'd once used preparing lesson plans. Around midnight, Daniel came home. I heard his key in the lock, his footsteps in the hall. He appeared in the kitchen doorway looking drawn, exhausted. "Melissa told me what happened," he said. "Dad, I'm sorry. She shouldn't have called APS without telling me first. Without telling him first. Not that she shouldn't have called at all. Not that the accusations were lies. Just that the timing had been wrong, the execution flawed." "Sit down," I said. "Please." He sat across from me, same seat he'd occupied for hundreds of family dinners, and I slid the recording device across the table. "Listen to this. All of it. Then we'll talk." He listened. I watched his face as Melissa's voice described symptoms I'd never shown, as she pushed Dr. Harrison to find problems that didn't exist, as she revealed in her anger what she'd been planning all along. When it finished, He sat staring at the device like it had betrayed him. "She's under a lot of stress," he finally said. "The pressure to buy a house, start a family, competition in her field." "Daniel." I waited until he looked at me. "She tried to have me declared incompetent so she could take control of this house. That's not stress, that's calculated abuse." "She wouldn't," but he stopped. "Because the recording proves she would. She had. She did." "Tomorrow I'm filing for a protective order," I said gently. "Patricia is updating my will. If Melissa gains control of my property through fraud, or if you remain married to her, you don't inherit anything." His face went pale. "You're choosing the house over me?" "I'm protecting myself from someone who sees me as an obstacle to asset acquisition. If you can't see the difference, if you're going to stay with someone capable of this, then yes, I'm choosing my safety and independence over financing your marriage to someone who tried to destroy me." He stood abruptly, chair scraping. "She's my wife, and I'm your father. She made her choice. Now you need to make yours." He left without another word. I heard him upstairs, the muffled sound of argument starting immediately. Melissa's voice sharp, defensive. Daniel's lower, questioning. I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by evidence of someone's systematic attempt to erase my autonomy, and waited for morning. The protective order hearing happened fast. Patricia had connections, had filed emergency motions. 48 hours after the APS incident, we stood before a judge in her 60s who'd seen enough cases like mine to waste no time on pretense. She listened to the recording, reviewed the timeline of escalating behavior, looked at Melissa with the kind of cold assessment that made the courtroom feel 10 degrees colder. "Mrs. Patterson, you filed a false report with Adult Protective Services." "Your Honor, I was genuinely concerned. You brought a man you identified as a doctor to conduct an evaluation, but Mr. Harrison isn't licensed in Texas. He's a life coach who advertises online coaching services. That's fraud." Melissa's attorney, a young man who'd been checking his phone throughout the proceedings, stood quickly. "My client was acting on what she believed to be her father-in-law's best interests." "Her interests," the judge corrected. "The recording makes that clear. Mr. Mitchell, the protective order is granted. Mrs. Patterson is to maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from you and your property. She has 48 hours to remove her belongings. Any violation results in immediate arrest." Walking out of that courthouse into afternoon sun that felt too bright, too normal for what had just happened, Patricia touched my arm. "This isn't over," she said. "People like Melissa don't accept losing. Be careful." She was right. That evening, while Daniel was at work, and Melissa should have been packing, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Mitchell? This is Capital One fraud investigation. We're seeing some unusual activity on your home equity line. Large withdrawal yesterday. Did you authorize?" My stomach dropped. "I don't have a home equity line." Pause. "Sir, according to our records, you opened this account 3 weeks ago. Initial draw of $50,000. There's another pending withdrawal for $75,000 scheduled to process tonight. I was already opening my laptop, pulling up my bank accounts, my credit monitoring. Someone opened it fraudulently. I never applied for any credit line. I'll freeze the account immediately." "But sir, the initial application included a signature that matched your ID, driver's license, social security card, property deed, everything verified. Everything she'd had access to while living in my house. My documents kept in the office desk that had never been locked because I'd never needed to lock it. She'd forged my signature on loan applications, stolen my identity, opened credit lines using my property as collateral. 50,000 already gone. 75,000 waiting. I need to report this to police, I said. This is identity theft and fraud. The Capital One representative connected me to their fraud department. They connected me to a supervisor. By the time I hung up 2 hours later, I had case numbers, frozen accounts, and a sick understanding of how far Melissa had gone. I called Patricia, left a voicemail, called the non-emergency police line, filed a report, called Daniel. Your wife stole my identity and opened a home equity line. $50,000 withdrawn using forged documents. Another $75,000 pending. Silence. Then, that's impossible. Capital One has the paperwork, signature, my ID, everything. She had access to all my documents while living here. Daniel, she committed felony fraud. She wouldn't, but his voice had lost conviction. He'd started too many sentences with she wouldn't, only to discover she would, she had, she did. The police will want to talk to her, I said. Tonight, if you're there, you might want to consider whether you want to be. I hung up and sat in the darkening house, every light off, just waiting. Around 9 p.m., police arrived. I'd given them permission to enter the property to interview Melissa about the fraud. I watched from my office window as 2 detectives went to the guest house where Daniel and Melissa had retreated after the courthouse hearing. Raised voices. Melissa's distinctive sharp tone climbing toward panic. Daniel's lower, questioning. The detective standing firm, professional, unmoved by whatever story she was trying to construct. They left after an hour with Melissa in handcuffs. Not because she'd confessed, but because Capital One had sent the paperwork showing forged signatures that handwriting analysis could prove weren't mine, showing IP addresses from her computer for the online applications, showing the money deposited into an account in her name. Daniel stood in the driveway watching the patrol car's taillights disappear, shoulders slumped like someone had cut his string. I found him there 20 minutes later, still standing in the same spot. I didn't know, he said without turning around. I swear, Dad, I had no idea she was doing any of this. I believe you, and I did. Daniel had been as much a victim of her manipulation as I had, just from a different angle. But you have to decide now. What comes next? She's my wife. She's a criminal who tried to steal your inheritance and destroyed your father to do it. If you stay with her, you're choosing her crimes over your family. He turned finally, and in the porch light I could see tears on his face. 38 years old and crying like the boy who'd held my hand walking to school. I don't know how to choose, he whispered. Yes, you do. You're just afraid of the answer. 3 days later, Patricia called. Daniel filed for divorce, served her in county jail while she's waiting for bond hearing. He wants you to know. I sat down slowly, phone pressed to my ear, emotion flooding through channels I'd tried to keep dammed. Relief. Sadness for what Daniel was losing, even if what he was losing was someone who'd never deserved him. Pride that he'd made the right choice, even when it cost him everything. Is he okay? No. But he will be. He's moved into a extended stay hotel for now. Asked if I thought you'd be willing to see him. Of course. My voice came out rough. Tell him to come home. He arrived that evening carrying a duffel bag, and shame so heavy it bent his shoulders. I opened the door, and he stood there, and before either of us could speak he was crying. Really crying, the way he'd cried when his mother died and the world had tilted wrong. I pulled him inside, held him while he broke, and didn't say a word. Sometimes there are no words. Sometimes you just hold on and wait for the worst to pass. Later, much later, we sat at the kitchen table with coffee neither of us were drinking. The bank says they'll recover most of it, Daniel said quietly. The $50,000 went to offshore accounts, but they're working with federal investigators. She's facing multiple felonies, wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, elderly exploitation. I'm sorry you're going through this. He laughed bitterly. You're sorry? Dad, I brought her into your home. I let her treat you like an inconvenience. I said I'll talk to her, instead of actually standing up to her. This is my fault. No. She made her choices. You made yours. Both of you are responsible for your own actions. I chose wrong for so long, but you chose right in the end. That's what matters. We sat in silence, the house quiet around us in the way it had been quiet when Sarah was alive, and we'd wait up together for Daniel to come home from dates, from college visits, from wherever teenage Daniel was exploring the world. The house remembered those nights, held them in the wood and walls, and now we were here again, waiting together for something to heal. I'd like to stay for a while, Daniel said. If that's okay. I know after everything. Your room is exactly how you left it, I interrupted. Stay as long as you want. This is your home. His face crumpled briefly before he controlled it. Thank you. Over the following weeks, Daniel moved back in properly. Not the guest bedroom where Melissa had held court, but his actual childhood room upstairs. We fell into routines that felt both new and ancient, coffee together in the mornings, taking turns, cooking dinner, watching baseball games in the living room like we used to when he was young. He started therapy, worked through the manipulation and control he'd been living under without recognizing it. I learned from his therapist, in carefully worded conversations Daniel shared with permission, that emotional abuse often looks like concern until you step back and see the pattern. She had me convinced I was the problem, Daniel told me one night. Every argument, every issue, she'd twisted until I was apologizing for things she'd done. I don't even know when it started. You know now. That's what matters. Melissa's trial happened 4 months later. Federal charges meant serious time, and her attorney tried every angle to negotiate a plea, but the evidence was overwhelming. 50,000 in fraudulent withdrawals, forged signatures, the recording of her staged intervention, witness testimony from the fake doctor she'd hired, from neighbors who'd heard her talking about the house like it was already hers. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Angela Torres, called me to testify. Mr. Mitchell, can you describe the pattern of behavior you observed? I walked the jury through everything. The realtor's card, the uninvited appraisals, the APS call, the discovery of fraud, each detail building on the last until the picture became undeniable. And how did this affect your relationship with your stepson? It almost destroyed it. She counted on that. Counted on me being too afraid of losing him to protect myself. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Came back with guilty on all counts. Melissa got 8 years federal prison, restitution of all stolen funds plus damages, lifetime ban on any financial power of attorney or estate executor roles. When the verdict was read, I felt Daniel's hand find mine across the courtroom bench. He squeezed once, hard, then let go. Walking out of that courthouse, spring sun warm on our faces, he stopped on the steps. I need to say something. I should have said it months ago. He turned to face me fully. I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it, for bringing her into your life, for not seeing what she was doing, for choosing her over you again and again until you had to protect yourself. I'm sorry. I forgive you. Simple words that felt enormous. And I'm proud of you for making the right choice when it was hardest. We went home together, to the house that had weathered everything and remained standing. That evening, Daniel and I sat on the back porch watching sunset paint the sky orange and purple. The same porch where Sarah and I used to sit, where Daniel had learned to catch fireflies in mason jars, where 30 years of life had layered meaning into wood and nails until it became more than structure, became memory made solid. I'm going to stay for a while, Daniel said. If that's still okay, save money. Figure out what's next. Maybe we could tackle some of those projects together. Fix the deck railing, paint the guest room. I'd like that. I looked at him, seeing not the scared boy who'd lost his mother, not the manipulated husband who'd almost lost his way, but someone stronger for having been broken and choosing to rebuild. This is your home too, Daniel, for as long as you want. He nodded, eyes on the horizon where light was fading into deep blue. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. We sat there as stars began appearing, one by one, tiny lights in vast darkness. The house behind us warm and lit and full of second chances. Tomorrow we'd start repairs, paint walls, rebuild what had been damaged. But tonight we just sat together in comfortable silence, healing in the only place we'd ever really called home.